The Swamp Thing was created in 1972 by Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson. Now there's a new incarnation of the Swamp Thing by artists Stephen Bissette and John Totleben and writer Alan Moore. It's one of DC's fastest-growing fan favorites. We asked Len what he thinks of the new Swamp Thing.
Biggest question people ask me is, how could you let him do that to your characters? You know, how don't you hate what he's doing? You know, and people who don't realize that I picked him to do that. I have no problems with it. It's his book now. He's taken it in different places. I really enjoy what he's doing with the book, and as Karen Berger probably attests, as soon as a new script comes in, I demand a copy as soon as she's done reading it, just so I can see what he's doing. I'm fascinated by it.
One of the reasons the book works so well is the shared vision of the Swamp Thing's artistic team. Editor Karen Berger coordinates their efforts.
Before Alan even came to the book, Steve and John had their own visions of the character, and coincidentally it happened to be Alan's, you know, close to Alan's as well in terms of getting into really revamping the character and really getting to the horror aspect of the book.
We asked Alan Moore to give us his ideas about horror.
We're going to try and actually focus upon the reality of American horror and see if we've got some good material there to turn horror comics out of. You know, that's the plans.
You seem to be focusing on some world horror too, aren't you? Going to deal with nuclear war and...
Well, I tend to think that the horror that existed in the 40s with the Universal films, it's played out. It's a different audience now. I mean, what frightens people these days is not the idea of a werewolf jumping out at them. It's the idea of a nuclear war or any of the sort of the things that we have coursing through our society at the moment, you know. And I think that to really frighten people, you have to somehow ground the horror in their own experience, things that they're frightened of. I mean, in a recent Swamp Thing, I managed to touch upon bug fear, you know, because everybody's frightened of bugs, you know. It doesn't matter how big and tough they are, you know, you get a big enough spider, and so everybody backs away from it. So I suppose it's a bit cynical and manipulating, but I do like to try and put my finger upon the exact nerve, if possible, of what really scares people. It's sort of, it's sadism, and I'm getting paid for it, you know.
But you also have a conviction that about writing that what you're scared of, you won't write something that you're not scared of? Or?
Certainly. I mean, I think there was one of those ancient Chinese sages who say so many deep and interesting things, and they said that in order for your audience to enjoy your work, you've got to enjoy it. You've got to feel really strongly about what you're doing in order to have the conviction to actually communicate it to another person. If you write a funny story and you don't laugh, then why should anybody else? And if you write a story that doesn't frighten you, then you're not going to frighten anybody else. I mean, I actually reduced myself to sort of slobbering terror in the course of writing some of these stories. You know, you have to really press the buttons that make you feel disturbed, you know, which probably puts my family under great stress because, you know, I'm sort of sitting there under my writing table gibbering with my hands over my eyes, you know. But, yeah, I do feel that strongly. It has to affect you, or it's not going to affect anybody else.
How do you write? What is your mood?
Well, I have done a little bit of acting in a very minor way, so I try to approach writing from a method acting point of view, you know, the Marlon Brando touch. So, like, in order to write Swamp Thing, you have to lay in a bath with a load of mud and lugworms for a couple of weeks, and then you're in about the right mood to actually sit down and write a Swamp Thing script, you know.
Okay. Now answer me seriously.
Surely. Well, I don't know, that is pretty serious. I mean, I do get into a character to the point where I sit in front of a mirror and try and imagine what it would feel like to be that character, how their body would feel, whether it would be heavier than mine or lighter than mine, how they'd move. And it's pretty psychotic. I'm glad I work alone, because if anyone could see me while I was working, then I would probably be in one of the jackets that does up at the back by now, you know. But yeah, I sit there in front and I put on a voice, I talk to myself. I probably shouldn't be revealing this in front of an audience, but yeah, I mean, I do. I actually get into the part where I'm acting out my dialogue and seeing how it sounds. And yeah, trying to imagine a real person saying it, and that does help to get the flow and to get the characters accurate. And I think people can tell in the final analysis, you know. But again, it's something where if I've got a particularly horrible character to portray, then it doesn't do very much for the people around me for the days when I'm writing that character, you know. It's I'll become a pretty unpleasant person for that stretch of time, you know.
How does your family deal with that? Who are your family? Tell us about
My wife Phyllis and my two adorable daughters Leah and Amber, 3 and 6, and they've got used to it by now. You know, that they see sort of Daddy coming downstairs with a strange expression on his face, and yeah, I mean they know. They don't get alarmed by it anymore.